All right, take 4. I'm feeling good about this one. I like where we've come from and I like where we've gotten to. Howdy, folks. My name is Brian Bauman. I'm a veteran of the global war on terror. I'm an author of a couple of books and other things, including this one here, Hope is a Choice, My Walk Away from Suicide. Also a mental health patient here at the VA in Topeka. Today we're doing crisis intervention training. Kent asked me to come talk to y'all. I appreciate the opportunity to share my experience, and I think my experience with mental health as a veteran seems to be very common. Maybe not talked about as much, but I'm glad to talk about it because the reality is, the bottom line up front, like I said there, is you are not alone. I am not alone. The experience, while your experiences are personal and unique to you, they're also common in that other people have the same kind of suffering and disease that you have. Now, I have a question for y'all. You don't have to answer, but how many of you have ever thought about suicide? I would guess that at least 50% of the people in this room have thought about it, or if you haven't, you will at some point in your life, and that's okay. The point here is not to point out and make you feel bad, it's that you're not the only one. I've definitely thought about suicide. I still think about suicide. It used to be a daily occurrence for me. Thankfully, now it's not. But the point I'm getting at here is common knowledge of mental health disease. I have another question. Anybody know what a broken bone is? Yeah, we all know what a broken bone is. We know there's universal considerations and specific based on which bone it is. We kind of know how to identify that it's happened, what to do about it, what treatment to get, and we have an expectation that you will survive a broken bone. As a society, as a culture, as humans, we know how to take care of broken bones. Anybody know what a broken brain is? Yeah, what I'm trying to get to here is common knowledge of broken brains, just like we have common knowledge of broken bones. One thing that I want to point out to y'all is that suicide is a disease, as with all these other mental health diseases. And that helps because if you put stigma on mental health or on suicide, it breaks connections. Here's some stigma. Suicide is a sin, right? I knew that growing up. My mom still thinks that it's my own personal failing that I have PTSD. Somehow, if I had prepared myself better, if I had done something, she can't really say what, then I wouldn't have PTSD from having to search the dead body of a suicide bomber with a puddle of blood everywhere and like his femur sticking out because they'd been ripped off when he was blown out of the V-bid. Yeah, totally my fault that I wasn't prepared for that in life. Other things that are sorry, this happens to me sometimes. My brain gets too far ahead of itself. Distress definitely pushes people away. So the distress that you feel or show or exhibit from a mental health disease pushes people away, breaks connections. And we often focus on bad behavior of the person with the mental health disease, and we completely miss the cause of it. We need better outcomes because a lot of times what you see or observe is the person gets caught in flooding. So thoughts and emotions and overwhelm of this disease that this disease is causing comes up and manifests in a physical way, either withdrawn or too exuberant, too violent, too out of control. And they don't really have control over it like they would. But we just focus on the bad behavior and not like, hey, what's going on in their brain? So they're caught, they can't do anything about it. I get caught in flooding, I can't do anything about it. And yet, not either or, but both and, I am responsible for my actions. Those two things exist at the same time. And yet, usually as a society, we just focus on well, you're responsible for your actions, and that's all we engage with. We really need to start engaging with hey, you're caught in flooding and you need help. Mental health disease epidemic. The 22 a day thing. Those are some old numbers. but they're useful. They've been marketed well, and it helps point out that veterans have a higher incidence of suicide and mental health than the regular population. And that should point us to, hey, let's figure out what's going on and let's fix it. We've heard that antidepressant prescriptions are on the rise, and especially amongst young people. And that should point us to what's going on and why is this, and we should have a conversation and engage. Recently, I've heard about, I think ChatGPT is the one I heard about, AI convincing people to make a suicide attempt. We better pay attention to that. We really better pay attention to that. And then a very recent one, MAID, Medical Assistance in Dying. It's in Canada. We've heard some about that, but I heard about this one in Spain just a few days ago, where there was a young girl who got medical assistance in dying. She has now been suicided by the state. And her story goes like this. When she was younger, she was in some sort of an institution, I think like a boarding school, like the kind of got lost in translation there. And she was gang raped. And then because of that and nothing being done about it, no assistance, she attempted suicide by throwing herself out of a 5th-story window. Wasn't successful. She ended up as a paraplegic. And then through her suffering over the years from the gang rape and the suicide attempt, got depression, she requested medical assistance in dying. There was a bit of a legal battle there for a couple of years, but she was finally successful and was just suicided. So we treated mental health disease with another mental health disease, suicide. Now, it just doesn't seem like we're going in the right direction here. Does anybody remember the broken bone epidemic? Yeah, me neither. Because we've known what to do with broken bones for so long that we now have hope of success and survival from a broken bone. We need to go through the process where nobody remembers the mental health disease epidemic because we have hope of success and survival and we know what to do with mental health disease. That's what I'm getting at here. Real quick, hopefully quick, I want to share Rod's story with y'all. I was able to interview Rod in preparation for this talk. Rod is a Desert Storm veteran. He made a suicide attempt and was treated here at the VA in Topeka. Now, how I got connected with Rod. My wife and daughter and I, a couple of years ago, were doing a campus visit on K-State. And we went into the biology building because my daughter wants to be biochemistry. And we saw this lady, hey, Betty, how are you? And Betty has known Meredith since she was knee-high. So we go up, hi, how you doing? Oh, you're so big. What are you studying? All this stuff. And about 45 seconds into that conversation, Betty turns to me and goes, hey, my boss's husband just attempted suicide. You wrote that book about suicide. Can you talk to her? And in that moment, I'm like, well, not ideal, but I either care about veteran mental health or I don't. And so I said, yeah, sure, I can talk to her. And so Betty takes me down to the office and, hey, Sherry, this is Brian. Brian, this is Sherry. Brian wrote a book about suicide, and I know, Rod just attempted. Would you like to talk to him? The most awkward thing you can imagine. And Sherry's all in confusion. It had only been like 2 days since Rod attempted suicide. And so I get ushered in and sat down, and all these emotions are on Sherry's face. And then I see like this mask kind of slide down, and she says to me something like, well, Rod was EOD. And EOD is kind of a unique thing in the military. And it was meant as a way to, like, you're not going to have anything to say, you're not going to understand. And so I just said, yeah, I'm EOD too. And the mask just fell from her face and all the emotions came out. And then there was just this frantic almost conversation back and forth between the two of us. She got to figure out what she wanted to tell me and get it all out. And I had to figure out what questions to ask to understand what was going on and what kind of treatment. Because if he's committed suicide, is he getting treatment? Are you getting treatment? Do you have support? Is the family there? On and on and on. And like 30 minutes of just rapid fire stuff. And then I was on my way with my daughter to continue the visit. And when I got home that night, I connected Sherry with After the Long Walk. It's an EOD group on Facebook. And they reached out and they found Rod in the VA here and connected with him and got some folks to talk to him and connected with Sherry and got them both resources and checked in on them. And then I've been staying in touch with them for the last couple of years. It's actually almost to the day Rod's 2-year anniversary for his suicide attempt. Now, what happened with Rod is life stuff. Rod has chronic pain in his back. His discs are gone and the bones are fusing together with spurs and stuff. The doc said it's turning into like bamboo. Looks like bamboo. And Rod was on a lot of pain meds, and the doc managing them was just, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this. Rod felt not really paying attention to it, and the listed side effect on all of these meds was suicide ideation. And then one night, as happens, Rod and Sherry had a fight. Rod had made Reuben sandwiches for dinner, and Sherry got upset at him for it because they're too salty, and she's watching her salt intake, and she's trying to go low fat, and there's all this fat in the meat, and then, oh, by the way, I got to go back to campus and go to a meeting. And Rod says he remembers standing there at the sink, and just in his head, he goes, well, I guess this is it. Now, he did try to call his therapist, but it was 7 o'clock that night, so she didn't answer. He went into the bedroom, took all of his tramadol, pain medication, and then he went to the liquor store, bought a bottle of vodka. He remembers telling the cashier, you can keep the change, I don't need it. And then he doesn't remember just little bits, like he remembers driving by one of the landscape businesses, and he was going to this little town up north of us, to the cemetery there. I don't exactly know why. He remembers pulling into somebody's driveway to turn around because he got lost. Well, he actually backed into their door on their garage. And then he remembers stopping at a stop sign. He actually parked on top of the stop sign and thinking, okay, I can't find the cemetery. This is as good a place as any. And laying his head down on the seat of the pickup, right where the dog would normally ride, and falling asleep. He doesn't remember RCPD pulling him out of the vehicle, hauling him into the ER. He woke up in the ER when Sherry was there, and everyone in the ER is treating this like a DUI until Sherry shows up and goes, hey, Rod, where's all the tramadol? And then they start treating it like a suicide attempt. Rod ended up going to St. Joe's in Kansas City and then got transferred here to the VA in Topeka. Successful inpatient treatment. He's getting good help now, not only with his mental health stuff, but all of his other physical health, his pain, his back, his dental, everything. The VA is really stepping up and helping him. And when I asked Rod about his interaction with law enforcement personnel while he was here inpatient, he said they should be commended. He was really impressed with your interaction in crisis intervention situations and how you de-escalated things and just how you operated. And I wanted to share that with you today. My story, suicide scare. I was working at K-State in the ground shop. My boss had figured out that he could get me angry and how to get me angry and that he could control me with my anger. So that had happened. I was leaving the shop, heading to the back side of campus just to check on a project, get away, cool down, not be angry anymore. I had Nick with me, a student worker. And rather than try to do this from memory, I'm just going to read from my book so I can avoid all the emotions that come with this. So I'm driving my assigned utility vehicle full of tools. I was chewing on things in my head as I approached an intersection. Then my brain betrayed me. Just kill yourself. What? No. Do it. No. Besides, I don't have a gun and Nick is with me. Take the utility knife in your pocket, the one with the new razor blade you just installed, and cut your throat. Wait. Do it lengthwise down your neck. The blade is so sharp you won't feel it much. You can take the pain, and if you do it quickly, no one can stop you. or save you. At this point, I stopped at the stop sign and then proceeded through the intersection. No, I am not killing myself. This is all going on in my head. Do it. No. Do it. No. I'm going to ignore you. Do it. No. But you want to. Yes. No. I had experienced suicidal thoughts before, but nothing like this. Those conversations in the past had been casual ideas that didn't stay around. This was persistent. It would not shut up, and it would not take no for an answer. It scared me badly. I struggled with those suicidal thoughts, that suicidal ideation, the rest of the day at work. On my drive home, I had to fight against thoughts of ramming my pickup into a bridge abutment, trying to kill myself, or into oncoming traffic. I parked at home and I walked inside and I'm shaking. I told my wife what was going on. She didn't really know what to do. We eventually kind of figured out, call the suicide hotline. I did that. I talked to somebody helpful on the phone. What we ended up doing is I took that razor blade out of my pocket and I set it on the picnic table in the yard outside the house, and I went back inside. And that little motion was enough to just shut the voice up completely. From there, I got plugged into the VA mental health system. Onboarding, this is all on phone mostly. Within a couple days, I got plugged in and talked to a psychiatrist. My diagnostic appointment was confusing. I expected to be able to talk to the doc about my problem, like in detail. And instead, what I had to endure was like a laundry list of almost repeating questions, ever more detailed. What she was doing was going through the DSM-5, trying to diagnose me with a mental health disease. I was not ready for that. That did not help. What came from that, though, is I started meds before I ever started therapy. The meds helped with my symptoms. Absolutely, my kind of experience of life. I didn't feel as stressed from the mental health disease symptoms, but it didn't help any of the problems. And I didn't actually start treatment for the disease, so therapy, talk therapy and stuff, for about 6 months. And even then, when I got into that, I finally got into the clinic. The first couple of appointments were just intake appointments, which is just this long questionnaire of what's going on, what's your chief complaint, what do you want to do about it, what outcome would you like, this is our plan, on and on and on. What are you, all of your symptoms, all of it. It's frustrating. It's not what you expect when you go into mental health treatment for the first time. It's a barrier to mental health treatment. Thankfully, I made it through that. And I got into therapy. And I didn't make progress like I thought I would. I thought I'd be within 6 months or so, my mental health stuff would be cured and I'd have no more suicidal thoughts. What I learned over time is that small steps for me were measured in months. Big steps ended up being measured in years. And I went through kind of a perspective progression. I started out with just respect the process. You have a problem. It really scared you. You need to respect whatever process this is. And then I got introduced to a term called radical acceptance, but I didn't whatever. I'm just going to embrace the suck. There is something hard that must be done, and I am going to do it. And that, I had learned that in the military, so that's what I did. Eventually, I started to see little signs of improvement, little glimmers of hope, my kids I was interacting better with my family and my wife. So the work is definitely worth doing no matter how long it's going to take and how much effort you have to put in. There was the plateau of just having to grind through mental health therapy, just keep going. And what I came to at the end, where I'm at now still, trajectory is what matters. So peaks and valleys doesn't matter so much as long as you're on an uphill climb. As long as things are getting better, that's what you need to pay attention to. I will note that my quality of care was not that great. First off, continuity of care was problematic. I had 4 different therapists in my time. Rapport was kind of lacking sometimes with some of those therapists. And then at the end, even when I got to the last one who was good and did a lot of good work, made a lot of progress, there was a triage going on because at that time there were a lot of guys, a lot of veterans, not just guys, a lot of veterans needing mental health support at that clinic. And I was doing pretty good. And so I was cut loose so that she could handle other guys worse off than me. I want to talk about brain med demons real quick. Brain medications, SSRIs, SNRIs, other things used off label. They are magic potions with serious side effects. They do help, but they come at a cost. For me, life was often hazy on my brain meds. And I mean, like, just kind of a fog was in my experience of life. And I would be withdrawn from whatever reality was. So my behavior was better, my symptoms were better, my feeling of pain was better, but I was not connected to life like I had been in the past. And connection matters. I also experienced a loss of sensory sharpness. So there was about a 2-year period there where I couldn't even taste my morning coffee. My vision at distance and real close up in fine detail got kind of fuzzy. And it wasn't my glasses. My hearing got worse. Not just my tinnitus, but I couldn't connect with my ears to the conversations that were going on. And then when changes happen, and they do happen with meds, you got to get it figured out. There's no one right prescription for everybody. Things get kind of wicked. The first thing I experienced was sexual dysfunction. That was not a good thing to have happen for my relationship with my wife right then and there. And that brings me to the don't stop cold. So what happens is I had impotence. I called my doc. She says, oh yeah, that happens. We'll switch you to another one. You need to stop this medication. I said, okay, I've read a little bit about this. Are you sure I need to stop? She's like, yeah, it'll be okay. We'll get you on the other one and things will be fine. We'll get you on a better one with same effect, but no impotence. Are you sure? I just stop? Yep, you just stop. What she didn't tell me specifically was keep taking this medication until the new one gets here and then start taking the new medication. So I stopped, and there was like a 5-day gap there where I was just a raging asshole. It was worse than before I had started taking the medication. And for me, tracking and refill requirements became a real big issue, and this was doc dependent. My first doc would give me 60-day refills, and I could call in at 20 days, and she would get a new refill sent to the pharmacy here at the VA, and they would take their time to fill that up and send it in the mail and get it to me. And I never missed a dose other than if I missed it because I forgot to take it. And then I got switched to another doc who had issue with that 60-day refill. She really didn't like that because I had a chance of abusing my medications. And so I went to like 30-day refills and 45-day refills and back and forth, and we had all these arguments. And what would happen is she wouldn't let me call in at 20 days because that was an indication that I was trying to stock up and abuse them. So I had to call in at 15. Well, when I call in at 15, not every time, but every other time, I would miss a day or two of medication by the time it got through the pharmacy and got through the mail to me. And so I and my family would experience the raging asshole break off and on as I was trying to be treated for mental health. And that did not help my recovery. And withdrawal symptoms. Eventually that whole like spike thing and trouble with refills, I talked it over with my wife and family, and we just decided I am going to get off this because this is really disruptive to our life. I will try other avenues other than relying on medication to help with my recovery for mental health disease. And so I talked to the doc and said, hey, I need to get off this stuff. She really wanted me to stay on it. It was a back and forth. It was not very nice. But I said, nope, I am getting off. Tell me how to get off. All you got to do is you got to take 2 weeks of a half dose and then you'll be done and off. And by this time I had read and there were going to be withdrawal symptoms and I had experienced some of that. And I said, okay, are you sure? All I got to do is 2 weeks at a half dose and then we'll be fine. Yep, that'll be fine. Oh, you should probably be on them for the rest of your life. Okay, nope, we're not doing that. Click. So she sent me that script. I followed it to the letter, took my half dose. The next day was okay, no big deal. Thought, awesome, this is great. And then the second day, I didn't know what was going on at first. It felt like really bad seasonal allergies. And I went to work and I'm driving a bucket truck down the freeway. We're going to Fort Riley to take down a dead tree that a dead branch had fallen next to the car of somebody important, and that tree had to come down now. And so I'm driving, and all of a sudden, my brain glitched, like a glitch in the Matrix, like a half a second of reality just was missing. I'm like, okay, that's not good. What is that about? That's weird. Got to Fort Riley, set the truck up, and got the cones out and everything, and I hop up in this bucket truck with a chainsaw and I start flying the boom up to take down this dead tree, and I'm flying and the world just goes. I'm like, oh shit. Okay, I've never had seasonal allergies that bad. That's okay. Keep flying a little bit. Nope. Okay, we're not doing this. So I set the boom back down, climbed down out of the truck, let somebody else fly. I worked the ground. We got the tree done. And I've been thinking and thinking and thinking, like, this is not seasonal allergies. What else is going on? And so we got back to the shop and I said, I'm taking the rest of the day off. I called my family doc and I'm like, hey, this is what I'm experiencing. This glitch, this twist. I just got off these brain meds. Do you think that's what's going on? She goes, oh yeah, happens all the time. What you're describing, like the brain pops, the pop rocks in your brain, happens to everybody. We just need to taper you off more slowly. My general practice doc, she's not a psychiatrist, she's just a general practice doc, knew that there were problems getting off these brain meds and that we had to take a really slow approach to tapering me off. Sorry, I'm getting frustrated. It still really frustrates me. I have a very bad opinion of that psychiatrist and how she treated me. It took me 4 months to get off those brain meds. I will never go back on SNRIs again. They can help, just need to be aware that like that is a thing. Getting off of them can be a real thing. So my mental health diagnoses. Post-traumatic stress disorder. For me, that's getting stuck back into fight or flight. Anxiety, I have panic anxiety disorder, panic attacks. What I didn't realize about anxiety is how physically debilitating it is. I have been having anxiety attacks and decided I am going to power through this because I need to do this thing. I need to go to town and buy groceries. And I have grabbed my keys, locked the door, and been walking down the sidewalk to my pickup. And the anxiety just stopped me cold. And just like complete body ache, pain, sharp burning, sick. Like the anxiety just stopped me. And then there's no way I can drive and go get groceries doing that. And then I go back in the house and eventually I get relief from it. Depression, I'm diagnosed with major depressive disorder. So depression over long periods of time in your life. What I experience is a loss of my senses. My senses don't connect to the world anymore. My 5 senses go down and my emotions are just completely disconnected from everything. The best little meme quote that I found online about depression is it's living in a body fighting to live with a mind that's fighting to die. And that feels accurate to me for a quick quip. Suicide. I've experienced suicide ideation. I have not made an attempt or been successful, obviously. It was explained to me that those invasive suicide thoughts, the ones that come unbidden, are kind of like a default program that your brain runs when it's out of options and it can't figure out another way to make your situation better. And that happens because your brain is currently degraded in its capabilities by whatever mental health disease you're experiencing. And if you just wait, you just realize that that's what's happening, your brain will come back up to full capacity, and then those suicide thoughts will go away. but it's not a fun thing to experience. It really is not. And it can be despairing, and it can also be frustrating. Moral injury. I have not investigated this as much as I probably should yet. I still need to. When I got diagnosed, moral injury was just kind of being figured out and was mostly under PTSD. But for me, my experience of it is I lost respect for the officer corps in the military based on my experience. I went, like when I separated from the Air Force, I went the extra step of resigning my commission instead of just separating and going into the inactive ready reserve. I also have a traumatic brain injury, but it's not from military service. It was while I was an arborist. We were pruning this gigantic oak tree one day, and there's this long 20-foot limb on the bottom that's dead, needs to come off. And I'm standing on the ground. There's a guy up in the bucket, and we're looking at each other. And what ended up, it's stupid, but what ended up happening is he cut the branch off, and the limbs hit first and caused that big old branch to flex. It's about 8 inches in diameter, and the butt of that hit me right in the forehead. I was wearing a helmet, thankfully, but it knocked me back about 8 feet, knocked me on the ground, rung my bell really bad. I saw a couple of stars. I didn't black out, laid on the ground for about 15 minutes. Super embarrassed because it happened right in front of the customer. Took me to the doc there in town, diagnosed with mild concussion, and I could go back to work in 2 days. Yeah, what ended up happening is the pain was so long lasting that I had to stop doing arborist work. I tried to just, go to 4 days a week, go to 3 days a week, every other day type of thing, but my brain could not take the noise from chippers and noise from chainsaws. So that ended my arborist career. Other mental health diagnoses: complex PTSD, that's childhood stuff, kind of neglect and bad, crappy things. And then autism, or would have been called Asperger's just a couple of years ago for me, and ADHD. And those two, autism and ADHD, were kind of the last little pieces that fit into my puzzle of, okay, now I've identified everything that's wrong with me and I can start working on this mosaic. The point here is, rarely is mental health just one diagnosis. You're not just PTSD. There's going to be other stuff that's going to contribute, that's going to get woven in there. I experienced, and I think a lot of people experience with mental health disease, a lack of agency. So I have the perspective, because of the disease, that I can't affect my situation to make it better. And I also experienced flooding. Not psychosis, but flooding. So psychosis is a very specific thing. Flooding is very common in all mental health diagnoses, where it's just an overwhelm, an uprising of thoughts, feelings, emotions, bad behavior, and it all, because things are getting untangled, unwoven, unpacked, and all of it comes up at once, because the body keeps the score and it decides, you've suppressed this for so many years, now it's coming out in this moment. And that's flooding. I also have some comorbidities with my mental health. So things that contribute to negative outcomes for mental health. For me, self-medication was alcohol and tobacco. I was never diagnosed as alcohol dependent, but I was drunctional for a lot of years. I am happy to say that I've been sober for a year now. I'm glad of it. It's a good place to be. Still chewing tobacco, one thing at a time, folks. I'm not so sold that that one's awful. Bad memories. So of all the different things that I have going on, mental health, PTSD, military stuff, and other things, I have bad memories that come up. Be it situational about time in the military or time in childhood or whatever, and they come up, and in me they manifest in kind of body twitches and verbalizations. And so it's kind of embarrassing when it happens in public. My family has gotten used to it, and I just, for now, I live with it. Trying to figure that one out. Lack of purpose is very common. In the military, you have a purpose. It's in your job. It's right there in front of you every day. You train for it. You execute it. And then you come into civilian life, and what are you going to do? My purpose, what I've clamped onto for the time being, is helping others. So that's why I wrote a book. That's why I'm giving this talk today. That's why I've got a YouTube channel about mental health. Lack of purpose is very common for veterans. Pain. I just learned, and this was not in therapy, I learned a year or so ago from one of them Huberman podcasts, that neuroscience guy who does all the research, or at least finds the research and tells you about it, that there's only one pain circuit in your brain. Only one. It doesn't matter whether you stub your toe or you have a mental health disease, stubbing of something, some pain from that. It all runs through one circuit. And so that experience of my anxiety stopping me from going to town with physical pain, that's all through the pain circuit. That's why mental health disease causes physical pain. I also have generational patterns in my past. That's a complex PTSD stuff, both of anger and some attachment stuff. Attachment, yeah, well, I was the oldest of 11 kids, and, kind of go help, go do what you're on your own while we take care of the young ones. It happens. Two things that I haven't really looked into yet: self-hatred. I know it's there. I've identified it. I can see it. Haven't dug into it yet as to why. And survivor's guilt. Very common for PTSD. Why did I survive and somebody else did not? Haven't really done a lot of work on that one either. Self-harm. This was kind of a revelation to me. I didn't think it was self-harm for a long time. I thought it was just bad behavior. But my self-harm is, I would take this part of my hand in a fist and smash it as hard as I could against something that wouldn't break. We got a tile countertop in our kitchen that's this thick, and that thing's not going anywhere. I have self-harmed by smashing this hand into things so many times that now when I push down with that part of my hand, like to adjust myself in the seat of my pickup or whatever, I get nauseating pain, shoots up my arm and into my stomach, makes me want to vomit. I've also got some physical symptoms that have come and gone over the years. Supraventricular tachycardia, racing heart rate, unexplained, definitely related to anxiety. I've had hypertension, I've got tinnitus, psoriasis, asthma, gastrointestinal stuff. Sexual trauma is very common for veterans. For me, it was not somebody doing something to me, but it was a porn addiction that was over 20 years long. And that really disrupted my sexuality, personality, and my mental processes. I'm happy to say I've kicked that, going on a decade now, but that did not do any good things for my mental health. And then there's just the life stuff that comes along, right? The bad life things. Like, for example, my wife and I had a miscarriage 1 month after I got my TBI. That was really, really rough for both of us. One odd thing that she and I both noticed, though, is that when a big life change would happen, like when we moved from North Carolina out here to Kansas, my PTSD symptoms, my mental health disease stuff, just kind of went away. And we think it's because I had something new and engaging to focus on that needed all my attention. We got to pack the house, we got to buy a house, we got to plug in, we got to get water and garbage and all the other utilities, got to find a church, got to find people, got to find friends, kids go to school. And so it was a distraction from the mental health because I had something to focus on. I want to talk about anger here because I have a lot of experience with anger. For me, it's a generational pattern. I learned that anger was the proper thing to do from the time I was knee high. That's what dads did. That's what men did. Because it got imprinted on me at that young age, it's nigh impossible to unlearn. I am working on it. I have some hope for some other things, but it's a long, long road. Also, what I realized at some point is that anger, of all the emotions out there, anger is, or was, however you want to look at that, socially acceptable for men. Of all the emotions you can show for distress, anger is the most socially acceptable for a man. It's also alienating, though. Of the distress emotions, it might be the most alienating. It pushes people away. But anger is also powerful and protective. It's normal to use anger to set boundaries, but I wasn't doing that. I was using anger to grasp agency, to try to control things that seemed out of control. I used to get thrown into the fire room, And what would happen is I felt like I was inside of me, just this tiny little guy inside this little fire room that was hot, on fire, burning, searing, cooking my skin. I felt like I was burning alive. Looking out these two little windows in my eyeballs, watching the anger demon interact with my family and friends and whoever else around me. And there were no controls I could do to change what was going on. I just had to sit in that room and burn and despair until the fire demon released me from the fire room, and then I had to go pick up the pieces. Thankfully, I haven't been thrown in the fire room in a long time. It took a lot of work, though, to get out of that cycle. Tools that I have used. My mantra, hope is a choice. I put it as a title of my book. I decided long ago that was a truth I was going to hold on to. I've heard a lot of bad things said about hope. Hope is a beggar and whatever else. I don't believe that. It hasn't proven true for me. If I choose to hope, if I trust in God, and I trust in the process, and I trust in other people, I can make that choice. Whether it's warranted or not, I can choose to hope. And that has had long-term trajectory, good outcome for me. I also write. In addition to writing about my mental health stuff, I write fiction and poetry. I make videos on YouTube about mental health and other things. I did EMDR for a while. That's a specialized mental health therapy. With my last therapist, did a lot of good work with that. Nothing but good things to say about EMDR. I've talked to several people that have also done EMDR. I haven't had anyone yet say a bad thing about it. It's a phenomenal tool. I learned to celebrate my victories, even the small ones. An example here is one day, mid mental health journey about PTSD. I was taking my daughter somewhere. We were going out to get in the truck. She pulled down on the door handle instead of out and broke it, like just pulled it right off the truck. And I didn't get angry. I didn't yell at her. I didn't lose my temper. We just dealt with it. And that still is a wonderful memory, a small victory right in the midst of all that chaos where I was better, but I wasn't great. That small victory is wonderful. And then along the way, I realized I needed to get like a solid foundation to plant all of this mental health stuff in. And I got my physical health taken care of. I had, like you saw back there, I had a lot of things going on in my comorbidities. I got my hydration fixed. Fun fact for me, I can chug 24 ounces of water in one setting. And it's a phenomenal tool I use specifically because about 30 minutes later, no matter what mood I'm in, what I'm at, I feel better. Yeah, I got to go to the bathroom in an hour, but that is a tool I use. I got my diet straightened out. I now do intermittent fasting and I don't eat processed foods. We changed what we eat as a family. I exercise. I experimented with supplements of different kinds to help with brain mental health symptoms. Had some success with that. A big one is that my family and my wife and I have talked about, it's worth focusing on healing me at the expense of traditional employment where I could make a bunch of money. So non-traditional employment, I'm a self-published author and I have a YouTube channel and I've got a Substack. And it doesn't bring in a lot of money, but we are willing to do that for the benefit it brings our family. And the last tool I'll talk about is my faith. It's key to long-term success in mental health recovery. For me, what happened is I did everything I possibly could, all the avenues, all the tools, all the research, all the digging, all the Google searches, all the podcasts, all the treatments, everything. And I got to here, but I wasn't quite to the ledge yet where I wanted to be, where I wanted things in remission. I wanted to live a good life. And I had to take all of that and say, okay, God, I've done everything and I can't do anymore. You are going to have to do the rest. And the good thing is that God is faithful and he will do those things for you. And that has been my experience. And that's what got me to things are in remission and I can live a good life, even with still having suicidal thoughts and still going into depression sometimes and still having anxiety. Faith was the answer. So what kind of help is out there? I want to talk real quick about caregivers. For veterans with mental health disease, oftentimes the partner or the spouse is the sole caregiver until you can get them into therapy. But even therapists aren't caregivers. I'm talking about managing day-to-day medications sometimes, meals, social engagements, appointments, things like that. A lot of times the spouse or the partner is a sole caregiver. And a lot of times they do it alone. My wife, in reaching out to friends for help around her in her community, got told several times some version of, you should leave him. That's not cool. You should leave him. Thankfully, she decided not to. Actually, somewhere before, in the middle of the dark years, before I even had my mental health suicide scare I was talking about at the beginning, my wife, in her own mind, said, if he had come back missing an arm or a leg, with an awful disease, maybe been blown up by one of those IEDs, I wouldn't have left him. So I'm not going to leave him just because it's a broken brain. And that choice has paid huge dividends and been a drastic, wonderful part of my healing. I want to talk about buddy checks real quick because they are all about connection. I could talk for an hour just on buddy checks because I care a lot about them. But there's two kinds of buddy checks. One is passive. It's the call me anytime type of a buddy. And that's good to have that network around you that you can call. But oftentimes with mental health disease, you get caught to where you can't reach out. And so the other aspect of buddy checks that's necessary is reaching out to the person with the mental health disease. The active side of it, the call to check on people. It is important, though, for veterans to remember to ask for help. I did it as a social experiment, and because I had been an officer, I knew I needed to set an example to the other EOD guys around me who were veterans, and I started reaching out on social media. Nothing but good things to say about that. Never did I would feel embarrassed before I posted it, but after I felt relief, and the response to all of those honest things cemented for me that asking for help was necessary and valuable. There are obviously inpatient places you can go and retreats you can go on to help. I'm really interested in doing psychedelics someday. I'm interested in either ibogaine or psilocybin. I want to do that whole ego death, break it down, make your brain plastic. I'll still have all of my experience and all the data in my head, and hopefully I can rewire that into non-toxic, functional circuits. Gratitude is really important because there's a lot going on in your mental health disease. It's like, this is wrong and that's wrong and this is hard and I'm dealing with this and I'm dealing with this and I'm dealing with this. And also, we miss this though, there is a beautiful sunrise, birds in the trees, family that loves you, a good meal, a polite stranger. There's all sorts of things to be grateful for if you look. And so if you take an attitude of gratitude, that can help balance out all the stress, anxiety, and work you have to do in your recovery. And then persistence. I'm just not giving up. I am not giving up. No matter what it takes, I am going to continue to recover from mental health disease. Back to hope as a choice. Because what I face in the mirror every day is, what do I do when there is no cure? It's like cancer. It just goes into remission. You don't fix it like a broken bone and you don't notice it anymore. You live with it for the rest of your life. Here's some additional resources for y'all. If you haven't heard of mental health first aid training at this website, mentalhealthfirstaid.org. I think it was started in Australia. I've had a chance to take it a few years ago. It's like first aid CPR, but for mental health. Well worth your time. If you want to watch some of my videos about mental health, you can check out my YouTube channel, Brain Work. It's spelled different because broken brains work differently. You should really check out the Caregiver series my wife did about being a caregiver for PTSD. There's a playlist for that. If you want to contact me, I will listen. brainwork@gmail.com. And if you'd like more details of the story I've told you today, you can check out my book, Hope is a Choice, My Walk Away from Suicide. It's available on Amazon. Fun fact, if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read my book for free. Questions? Is there anything that I didn't cover you want me to cover?